All right, what a panel we have today, and we're really excited to kick it off. Thanks guys for showing up and being on today. We've got a great crowd. So Andy Warren, everyone knows Andy. He's the president of Maracay Homes, and he's known in the industry for a track record of being just an incredible leader, not just in home building, but in our overall community through Greater Phoenix Economic Council. He's presided over Maracay when they have been the #1 top company to work for as named by the Arizona Republic, and that's really hard to do. So great. Thank you, Andy, for being here. You're just a wonderful spokesperson for the industry and for your company. Darryl Berger, you're an amazing person. I mean, this guy he's got so many things going on. It's unbelievable, and he does them all really, really well. He's the co-founder of BB Living. I know everyone on the call has heard and is possibly trying to copy them now. He's a national leader in build to rent. He pioneered that industry way back in 2012. And he's teamed now with a private equity fund and Toll Brothers on those developments around the country. And he's also the founder of Berger Holdings, which is a diversified real estate investment company. He owns and manages multifamily rentals and hotels around the country. Is just an awesome person. So thanks, Darryl, for being here. And then Ann Signer, you guys all know Ann because Ann is the co-founder and CEO of Eco-Chic Consignments, and she's presided over My Sister's Closet, My Sister's Attic, and Well Suited for Men. It's built it into from nothing, and literally it's her idea to a $24 million business, 14 locations in Arizona and Southern California. And she's thriving even in economic conditions as they are. And she's just an amazing firecracker of a human being. So thanks for being here, Ann. And then Dr. Josh Lewis, frontline emergency room doctor. Thank you again, Dr. Lewis, for being on today. And so let's make it happen. And then Court Rich, the co-moderator, who may get a word in edgewise today. And so let's do it. But first, just in, I have, and I'm flashing it really quick because the person who sent me this told me that I was not allowed to disclose their identity. So we'll take guesses in the chat, but this is the person who is giving me the rules to the drinking game that has apparently been going on for weeks during our power lunch. Okay, so here's the rules in case you didn't know. 1, every time Joe Blackburn takes a bite of whatever he is eating, you have to take a sip. Okay, that's 1. Okay. Oh, and Joe's put on a shirt. I guess he got razzed too much. Okay. Number 2, every time DJ Peabody yawns, you have to take a sip. DJ Peabody, fantastic. Okay. 3, every time Rick West takes a sip, you have to take a sip. And then number 4, every time I swipe my hair, okay, you're gonna be drinking a lot, we have to take a sip. All right, makes for a great Friday. So anyhow, 3 guesses as to who that was. All right, let's do this thing. Oh, first of all, I did wanna say you gotta turn on your cameras today because we went to the focus your camera on your food if you don't want to show your face and show us what you're eating. And I see no one is doing that yet. So I will look forward to that. All right. Andy, I want to start with you. Tell us about the market in Arizona for Maracay right now. And what have you been seeing just over the last few months? Give us just kind of the rundown.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks, Jordan. First of all, in the last few weeks, it's been encouraging. It's interesting how everything is a function of the expectations that you have. So if you had told me in the middle of February that we were going to be having the kind of sales experience that we're having right now in May, I would have been really disappointed. If you had told me in the middle of April that we were having the sales experience that we've had the last few weeks, I would be pretty excited. So it really is, everything's relative to the expectations. To just talk in general, I think about what's been going on over the last couple of months, and to paint with kind of a broad brush, in for sale housing, you've got like 4 big categories or niches. You've got first time home buyers, you've got sort of a move up premium segment, you've got a luxury segment, and then you've got an active adult segment. And I think, initially in the end of March and certainly through the first few weeks of April, everything was suffering. Everything was in sort of lockdown, free fall. The whole world was very scared. And so I think all those segments, were equally, suffering. So since then, based on what I'm hearing, Maracay focuses primarily in the move up and sort of what I would characterize as the premium segment of the market. But certainly, the word that we've been sort of hearing and has been reported on is that the first time home buyer space really was the first to see some real strength. And going back, into the latter part of April and certainly through all of May. And really, if you think about what's going on there, by definition, a first-time home buyer doesn't have a home to sell. And they're also not as concerned as the other three segments about what's happening in the stock market. So the other three segments, the premium sort of move-up segment, the luxury segment, and certainly the active adult, in all cases, there's maybe they don't need to sell their house to buy the home, but there's a decision about what's going to go on with their existing home. And they're also pretty concerned about what's happening in the stock market in terms of the wealth effect and what kind of confidence they have to move forward with the purchase. So, really for the last 4 or 5 weeks, you've been hearing really encouraging things about the first-time home buyer segment. Now, unfortunately, Maracay doesn't really participate too significantly in that. A couple of communities that we've had some good velocity in, but generally we're in more of the higher price points and closer in locations. In Gilbert and Chandler and Peoria, sort of sought after locations. We're not out there in some of the further locations that builders like Horton and Meritage have really been, having some good success with their first-time home buyers. But recently, as I say, the last couple of weeks, it's been pretty encouraging. Our sales have really rebounded. We've seen sort of a tail off of some of the cancellations. Maracay, but I think just the whole industry had a phenomenal January, February in particular for us was the best month we've ever had in terms of our sales activity. I mean, it really felt like we were on the leading edge of, what might have almost felt like an overheated, it wasn't there yet, but it was feeling like the leading edge of potentially an overheated housing market. And then of course it just sort of got knocked, down pretty significantly. So a number of the sales that we had in February, maybe we're not super committed to the purchase as everything was unfolding with the pandemic. And so we had a higher rate of cancellations also than we've typically experienced. So those things combined to have, our, April be pretty underwhelming. But as I say, the last couple of weeks, it seems like the market has really picked back up. And then the last thing I'll say here, I'm happy to go into more detail on any of it, but I think a big part of what's happening that is particularly helping out those of us in new home building is there's a real lack of supply. Either speculative supply. There just wasn't a lot of spec homes that builders had in process for a couple of different reasons. But more importantly, I think the resale market has been really constrained. So people that had their house on the market maybe took it off the market because they didn't want to have people coming through their homes. Or they're just feeling like this is not the right time to list their market. So for a host to list their home. So for a host of different reasons, there just aren't a lot of options available in the resale market. So even though the demand is definitely lower than it would have been a year ago, or certainly compared to the first couple of months of the year, the supply is also lower. And so what really drives, our sales and our values is the tension between that supply and demand. And since fortunately, I think for us, the supply of homes has declined at the same time as demand, we've actually been able to weather things pretty good. So anyway, the last few weeks have been pretty encouraging, and we're just almost living week by week right now.
Thank you, Andy. Well, thanks for the analysis. We appreciate that quite a bit. Darryl, let me ask you about BB Living. I will say, I think we've said this on this show before, that the for rent single family home market seemed to be genius prior to the COVID breakout, but then afterwards, where you think, are people going to want to live in a common elevator multifamily? And are people going to have down payments to pay for one of Andy's homes? I don't know. And now you look even more like a genius. So is that what you're seeing, or what are you seeing in terms of standalone for rent product?
Yeah, I mean, I think the theme would be there's an aversion to density. There's no doubt about it. Consumers, they kind of across the board, they don't want folks living above or below them. They don't want shared elevators or corridors or airflow. And yeah, we have seen a tremendous pickup in our leasing. It really has been a very healthy past 80 some odd days here since COVID began. We're seeing folks who are otherwise would-be home buyers canceling their home buying contracts. We're seeing multifamily renters who otherwise would be in multifamily and re-upping in multifamily coming to our product, which again has no one living above or below you, no shared elevators, et cetera. And then we're starting to see even bigger pickup of out migration from especially California. And we expect to see that in the dense markets, the kind of gateway cities. I think both Arizona and the build to rent product will be a great beneficiary of that out migration. So it's been a healthy couple of months here.
Darryl, are you up? I mean, are you up over a month, or were you like Andy and Maracay going crazy in February and then flattened out, or what kind of, how do you project that?
Yeah, no, we had two of our best leasing months in March and April.
Wow.
May has been strong too. So it's been very healthy, and we think the tailwinds they were behind us before COVID, and for all the reasons I just articulated, I think they're going to be even stronger coming out of this. The John Burnses of the world, the housing economists, think that up to 10% of U.S. housing starts should be for rent. That was a pre-COVID number. I think that could increase up to 15 or so percent. And the supply for this product is not being met. So I think there's a runway in front of us. A lot of folks who are getting into the space are getting into a version of build to rent that's slightly different than what BB Living does. It's nuanced, but BB Living plays in exclusively the 3 and 4 bedroom space. And most of our quote unquote competitors are in the 1 and 2 bedroom space. We also have a 2-car attached garage in all of our units. So I think in this COVID world that helps. People can pull right into their units to the extent that they're fearful of the pandemic or whatnot. And we're playing again in a bigger unit. Our average square footage is 1,700 square feet. It's a true single family dwelling. So we've been very encouraged by what we're seeing in the market.
So wait, I got to follow up there. But Darryl, so obviously you were betting on that market anyway and thought it would do good. Just trying to be clear. Are you saying you're doing really well in spite of COVID, or COVID's like actually turbocharged it and you're doing even better because of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to really know, Court. I mean, the numbers, the leasing has been great.
Yeah.
I don't want to be cavalier and say that 40 million Americans out of work is going to help our business. It's certainly not. I'm wondering, like I think everybody on this call, like scratching my head a little bit as to what the heck is going on. I'm not certain the consumer kind of across that 40 million unemployed picture, I'm not certain that there's a big pinch per se, given the level of stimulus. So I think consumers at the moment with the stimulus are doing okay. And I think our product fits kind of perfectly into that space. I think there's a lot of people who otherwise would be buying houses who can't, are afraid of a down payment, who are coming to our product. Again, there are a lot of people fleeing California, and there's a lot of people trying to get into a superior rental product. So far, so good. But I, like I'm sure everybody, am a little nervous about a second wave here and what happens after July when the stimulus checks stop coming and so forth. So I guess what I'm saying at macro is I'm bullish for this asset class relative to other asset classes for sure. But that is not to say that if there's a deep recession here that we're not going to be impacted. We certainly are. I just think we're going to be impacted less than other asset classes.
Thanks, Darryl. Thank you for the analysis. Anne, so I want to ask you before we talk later a little bit about My Sister's Closet and your other stores and how they're doing as you've reopened with the governor's orders here in Arizona. We always love to contrast Arizona with what California is doing. I think all of us like to talk about how we're doing everything so much better than California in order to attract more Californians to move here and do business and all that kind of stuff. But you have a real life example of that. And I wondered if you might share your experience in California versus your experience in Arizona. Could you talk about that, or is that too close to the...
I would love to.
Fantastic.
Yes, so just a brief background. In Arizona, we were deemed an essential business, believe it or not, because we are a pawnbroker. A pawnbroker's license for 30 years and finally paid off. So we could have been open in Arizona the entire time. We thought would be a stupid thing to do, but on May 1st, we said, let's dive in the pool, let's open our stores in Arizona, let's get back to business. And the opening went pretty well. You know, we're down probably 60 to 70% from the normal customer count, but we're open, we're making sales, people are bringing in product. So great news. So California kept putting off opening. Finally, the governor announced retail can open. So I went out to California, you know, did a big email blast, and did my best to bring some staff back. And then all of a sudden, the night before we were supposed to open, he announced, no, it's curbside pickup only. And I said, we're completely brick and mortar. We've got to have people in the store shopping. And so we were super safe. We only 10 people at a time. We wore masks, but the police came and visited us every day. The San Diego store, the police there were actually more decent and said, we are in an education phase. We're not going to give you fines or citations. We're just going to educate you. I'm like, okay, great, educate me. But our stores in Encinitas, we have 3 stores in Encinitas, California. There they have a local sheriff who came to visit us. And I said, well, if it's curbside, I'm just gonna move all my racks and my furniture out curbside. I don't think he liked that very much, because the next day he came back, gave us a $1,000 citation, a court date, the potential of 6 months in jail, because we had customers in our stores. And, and then they proceeded, they went to our other store and we didn't have a customer in there, so we weren't breaking the law. So then they proceeded to drive by every hour and look in the window to see if we had customers in the store. It was insane.
Wow. So are you,
Really?
so you have to go to court in Encinitas because you had a customer in your store?
Yep.
Huh.
It's not till August. And of course, as you know, Jordan, the courts are severely backed up, but you know, they have to harass businesses rather than go after real, truly bad guys. It's much more fun to harass business in California. And I will echo probably everyone's sentiment. It is so difficult doing business in California. And I think both Andy and Darryl are just going to reap the benefits of so many people, not just moving to California, but I think from the East Coast. My friends on the East Coast said, we're done with this. You know, we want the wide open spaces, and we don't care if it's 110. We want to be someplace where things are open. It's a great environment for business. You know, you guys know the story.
Well, let me just go back for 1 second to the sheriff comes to your store, and how's that interaction go? Because you are a fireball, so I'm just curious as to how that interaction went.
But I was actually, when they came to the Encinitas store, I was at the La Jolla store. So, but my staff on the phone, and I talked to the sheriff, and I said, do not harass my employees. If you have a problem, you can take it out on me. You got a phone number, you know, call me. Do not bother my employees. The other thing they did was unbelievable. In California, you have to wear a mask. It's the law. You don't have a choice. The Encinitas sheriffs came in without masks on. I know, Darryl.
No, above the law. There you go. Amazing.
Oh, yeah.
That's amazing. Well, we'll be anxious to hear about your court fight in California? That's
We
that's
you could
crazy. In
visit
fact,
in
our
jail.
firm will represent you pro bono because that is just such ridiculousness. I'm offering that up right now.
Thank you.
It's just stupid. Oh boy. Okay, Dr. Lewis, you're on the front lines in the emergency room at a local hospital. Tell us what you're seeing right now and what your thoughts are as the state opens up.
Oh, we can't hear you,
You're on
Josh.
mute. All right, we're not hearing the doctor, so maybe Ralph will work on that with the doctor for a second here. Let's get him back on track.
Oh, here we go.
There we go. Okay, he can.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
now we can hear you. All right.
Okay, cool.
All
All
right, good deal.
Hey, thanks, guys. Business in the emergency department during this time in general has been quite slow. Most hospitals have been struggling severely. That is improving, meaning that patients are feeling more comfortable coming back to the emergency department, although there's still, our numbers are still down. On the other side, though, the COVID cases are going up. The hospital where I work, we have the highest number of COVID cases we've had come through the emergency department and in the hospital. The Arizona Department of Health website has on it we are experiencing the highest number of cases we've had. As of yesterday, we have the highest number of patients in hospitals. We have the highest number of cases and associated with all parts of the hospital, meaning the emergency department, the ICU, inpatient beds. Our ICUs are 80 to 90% full across the state. So it is going up. And so those who thought that this would go away in the summer, it is not. It is continuing to go up. So as the social distancing is relaxed, what we're seeing is an increase in volume of COVID, which is what we thought would happen. But I think it's still safe to be out and about in reasonable ways and to start getting back to somewhat of a normal life as long as you take reasonable measures. I think that, yeah.
Okay. What's the most important thing you can do, in your opinion, if you're going to go out?
I think there's still a lot of confusion in that regard. And it became even more confusing when the World Health Organization announced that, you know, you don't need to wear a mask if you're not around somebody who, like, you're caring for somebody with COVID. So I think if you just keep your distance from the general public, wash your hands, if you feel comfortable wearing a mask, I think it's reasonable to wear a mask. I do think there's data to show that a mask protects you and others. But I think being in large public gatherings is probably not a good idea at this point.
Would you get on an airplane with a mask if everybody else has got a mask on? I'm asking that really because I'm trying to get Court to go on a family trip with me, and he won't go on an airplane.
Yeah,
so
no, I think it's
I'm not feeling the airplane quite yet.
I really want you to say yes. Of course, I would do that.
I mean, it's a totally reasonable question. I think we're all asking that question, and my wife and I even talk about it at home. Like, should we be, you know, planning travel, getting on an airplane? And I don't know. I guess the answer is, for me, I don't feel comfortable with that yet because I think there's too many unknowns, and that I know that the numbers are increasing, and I don't know that I personally feel comfortable with doing that. I think if you take reasonable measures, you're wearing a mask, you wash your hands, I think that you can probably do it safely, but there is risk when you travel on an airplane. You're in close proximity to other people, whether or not that air is filtered. I don't know. We don't have the data to show that airplanes are a common place for this to be spread, but I can't imagine that it is not spread when you get on an airplane that is full of other people.
Have fun, George. Send me a picture.
I will, buddy. I will. He'll be jealous. All right, live your life. Okay, all of mine. Andy, let's let's talk through California migrants. Are people, and I mean, are we seeing what we're hearing that we're going to see, which is, you know, my friend in California says, the heck with this high density living, I'm coming to Arizona, all that kind of stuff. Are you seeing that actually? Is that a home building thing, or is that just sort of what we all think is going to happen? Have you started to see it?
Well, it has been a home building thing for since I've been here in Arizona for the last 11 years. So I wasn't here in the early 2000s. I moved here to Arizona in 2009. And there's always been a certain proportion of our buyers that are coming from, you know, markets like California or Washington, or, you know, some places that have certain challenges with them, oftentimes, you know, expensive cost of living, and then, you know, they're attracted to the more affordable cost of living to here in Arizona. I can't tell you that we've seen anything in the last, you know, several weeks where there's been some significant proportion of our buyers that are you know, a growing proportion of our buyers that are coming from California.
Or a big city like Chicago, New York. And can you try? I mean, I'm sure you track these things.
We do, and no, I think frankly, most of the buyer activity we've seen is, you know, as I said, you know, the beginning of the year was shaping up to be so strong. There was so much inertia around people, you know, a lot of local people, a lot of job creation that's happened in the last couple of years, a lot of, you know, household formations that took place, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, just all the traditional reasons of someone wanting to move to a better school district or a larger home. And, you know, these plans were in place, and then they kind of got frozen, but in many cases they didn't just get eliminated. You know, and people are starting to feel more confident, and they know they're able to sell their house, you know, because there really hasn't been any kind of erosion of values. And so most of the activity that we've seen has been really not too dramatically different from the transactions that we saw, you know, before COVID. But I share your enthusiasm for the future. I think in particular, what could happen, what could be a very significant game changer is this move with, especially like technology companies based in the, you know, Bay Area or in Seattle, where there's this big push towards, okay, work at home, you know, and where companies have realized, yeah, we can actually continue to do business, in some cases thrive with our workforce working remotely. And then there's going to be like a real head scratcher. Well, then why do we want to be in the most expensive market, you know, in the country, you know, for housing and for all these other reasons, if our workers don't need to be there? And so, you know, there's this notion that there's going to be, you know, more, you know, like satellite locations. It was already sort of happening. Companies that were starting in the Bay Area were going to scale in markets like Phoenix or Salt Lake or Austin, you know, rather than going to scale in California. But, you know, that trend will accelerate. And isn't it interesting, you know, like a lot of these things are just these trends that were already taking place, and just, as you mentioned a minute ago, you know, get kind of like supercharged, or for whatever reason, you know, what we've experienced has kind of accelerated those things. So I do think that's going to happen. I do think you're going to see, you know, some more migration over the next several years of technology companies in particular, you know, that are in some of these very expensive California and other West Coast markets, moving to places like Phoenix. So it's going to be a good thing for us for sure.
So are you thinking of, are you buying land at this point, or what are you doing based on your projections?
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, so like Maracay is part of TriPoint. TriPoint's a publicly traded national home building company. The Phoenix market is pretty much dominated by national publicly traded home building companies. And I would say that our decisions were really very similar all the way across the board, across all the big players in this space. And I think probably because most of the people that are in leadership, executive positions, were in executive leadership positions during the Great Recession. There hasn't been any kind of like big sort of turnover of leadership. And so these painful lessons that, you know, we all learned through, you know, the Great Recession, which was this protracted, you know, 5-6 year grueling period of time, you know, everyone was on high alert and immediately wanted to put those learnings in place. So things such as preserving cash, right? You know, hey, the liquidity can be a big problem. You know, you don't know what the future is going to bring. So so Maracay / Tri-Point, but really all, builders were really making the same sort of decisions about deferring land purchases, looking for ways to sort of stop or slow down, spend on land development if for you were thinking that maybe you were paving or developing more lots than you were going to be needing in the next short period of time. And for sure, sort of chilling on the new land sourcing. But, it's been really kind of crazy what has happened in some sort of way. And I'm not saying we're out of it and it's over, but over the last 4 months, we've had this like compressed version of a home building cycle that normally takes 4, 5, 6 years, right? So we had the best February, that's everyone ever had, right? So like a really great market. Then we had sort of the free falling experience, which is what, a lot of, home builders, everyone in real estate was feeling in 2007 and 2008. You're like falling, you don't know where the bottom's going to be. And then, you hit some sort of bottom, and then you start to experience some recovery. So seriously, from February, where it was great, March all of a sudden it started to turn. April was super scary. Everyone's putting the brakes on everything. You got to make sure that you're, being super conservative. No one's starting any speculative homes or anything like that. To now here in May, it's like, wow, maybe it's not as bad as we had feared, and maybe it's, it's pretty encouraging. It isn't just anecdotal. There's like legitimate reasons why values have, held. And so we're starting to think, again, more about sort of the land acquisition side. So for us, we did all of that. We deferred on some. There's one acquisition that we did that, in particular, our corporate office was just a little skittish because it was in a submarket where we already had a pretty significant, acquisition. And so we chose not to move forward with that, but it's just been that one. And then there's a number of other, very significant opportunities that we're in and we're continuing to advance. And we actually did, we put a pretty significant piece of ground, under contract just within the last few weeks. So we're back in the land market, but I think, we're going to be super cautious. And the big challenge has been and will continue to be, how can you, with confidence, underwrite both values and absorption pace over time, because we really haven't had any kind of significant track record of recovery. So it's going to be, I think, still touch and go, for us and probably for a lot of players in this space for the next, several months.
Thanks, Andy. No, that's really insightful. Darryl, let's talk about how many of these for rent, how many are actually being built in Phoenix? Do you have a sense of that in the market, just generally? And then let's talk about your company and where you guys are going, and are you buying more and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we don't have the exact numbers in Phoenix on how many build-to-rent units are being constructed. But again, if you take kind of John Burns and other economists' prediction that up to 10% of starts should be built to rent, I don't think that supply is being met, certainly not nationally, and I don't think it's being met in Phoenix, probably not by a long shot. I mean, you just kind of, you sum up what BB Living, Next Metro, Christopher Todd, those are the three big players in the space. Each of us are, doing a few hundred units per year at this point in Phoenix. So I don't think it's adding up into the thousands and thousands of units. Although there are a lot of people getting into the space. So it's not just those three players. There's a lot of folks, but nevertheless, I think we are undersupplied from a demand standpoint in Phoenix, and we certainly feel that way nationally. So as to your question on where are we going, and to kind of Andy's comments on land buying, yeah, we're still, I mean, in the theme of being fairly bullish on the business model, we are wanting to be acquisitive and buy more land. I'd say the two governors on that are, one, we do have partners. We got a private equity fund and Toll Brothers, and we are scratching our heads as to why the land market hasn't softened at all. I don't know if that's coming or not. I guess the build-to-rent builders are doing fine, and the home builders are now kind of as of late doing fine. So perhaps that's keeping the land market afloat. It's a little bit frustrating though that we're not able to buy land less expensively than we were pre-COVID. That's number one. And then number two is the credit markets have completely frozen. So, we are facing the prospect in a lot of cases of doing these communities all cash. And I think that's a double-edged sword. I think that it'll keep some competitors out. But clearly, we want to leverage our projects where we can. And the banks are just frozen. So it's unclear when the banks will come back, at least on kind of favorable terms. I think there's still credit available, but full recourse and low leverage and so forth. So the jury's out as to when we can get back to kind of traditional debt facilities. So those are the two realities facing our growth.
Darryl, how many communities do you have going right now or in the planning process?
So we have kind of two phases that we look at. We have our existing BB kind of pre Toll Brothers communities, of which we built a little over 1,000 units in this market. And then about a year ago, we formed this venture with Toll and the private equity fund. And we have 12 deals in that venture. We are in Phoenix, and then west to east, Boise, Idaho, Denver, Dallas, and Orlando and Tampa. And then it was our business plan in 2020 to push into a few other markets, San Antonio, Austin, Salt Lake City, Vegas, and the Carolinas. And we're kind of pushing that, but COVID has, just because of lack of ability to travel more than anything, kind of slowed that push. So that might become kind of a late 2020, early 2021 push. But about 5 markets in that venture, 12 deals, representing around 2,000 units.
Awesome. That's awesome. Congratulations. Very, very cool. Thank you. Anne, let's talk about what your projections are with regard to resale clothing and furniture. Do you think this COVID thing gives you maybe an even stronger market or a weaker market? I know I read something that after the pandemic in South Korea, the resale clothing market was just through the roof, like multiple times what they had done prior. I don't know if we'll see this here or what your thoughts in your business are.
Jordan, let's hope we see it. But right now, what the statistic I'm hearing is that about 70% of Americans are still fearful to go out in a brick and mortar situation and truly shop. So I think one by one, as people get over that fear, it will get better. Because let's face it, everybody loves a bargain. Whether you're saving $1,000 on a Chanel bag or $100 on a basic work shirt. You can't live in your Lululemons all the time. It's our best-selling category in my sister's closet right now. It's interesting with our furniture stores. We have 4 furniture stores, my sister's attic, and the sales are actually decent there. And I think it's because everybody was stuck at home and they would look around their room and go, I'm so sick of this sofa. I hate this dining room set. And all of our trucks are running, so we can come pick up your items, make it super easy on you. And we're getting lots of calls. Can you come pick up my sofa, my whatever? And people coming in to want to replace things. So I think once we get through the summer, which is always an awful time, for retail in Phoenix anyway, I think it will continue to go up and up. In 2008 to 2012, what was the GFC for everybody else? We had double-digit comp store sales growth for 4 consecutive years. Our sales were off the charts. It was great. So let's keep fingers crossed that people are still looking for a bargain and they'll get over their fear of shopping.
Fingers are crossed. Absolutely.
Hey, Jordan, I'm gonna jump in for a minute.
Okay,
so,
you can do that.
Dr. Lewis, I was gonna ask you. I know I read recently, I think just this last week, the CDC put out sort of their new best guess on the mortality rate and infection rate of this virus, and I guess it was, at least to me, surprising and reassuring that they were, the projections were like 0.004%. Mortality rate, which is a lot lower than we had heard previously. And, the younger you were, the smaller those numbers got by a lot. What's your current thinking on that, or does that surprise you? Or oh, we can't hear you again. You're a pro at this. This is like your 5th time on, man. You should be.
I'm just angry that he screwed up our family trip with the no airplane for court recommendation. I'm hostile.
All right, well, we'll come back to that one in a second. Maybe for everybody, I guess I'm interested, and maybe we can go to Andy first. Are you all, and some of our guests on previous weeks have talked about what they're doing, in their own sales process or in their offices to try to make their employees or their consumers more comfortable? Have you changed, your operations? Are you doing, showing homes differently, like we've heard a lot of different builders doing? What are you guys doing there?
Yeah, so we are open now. We were closed for probably about 5 weeks or so. Closed meaning we were open by appointment only. We never shut down our sales offices. Typically, our new home advisors were in the community, but meeting with people just by appointment, and for sure lots of protocols in place in terms of pre-screening and social distancing that was taking place, and we are still, even though we're open now for drop-in visitors, we're being sensitive to the number of people that are in the sales offices and trying to just follow, all the best practices that we've all across all industries, learned to embrace. Specifically in terms of the buyer experience, Maracay was already, I think, different builders were on different places in terms of how sophisticated they were with using technology to engage with their customers. I wouldn't say that we were, state of the art, but we were probably on, the upper end of the continuum already. For instance, we have for a number of years now allowed our customers to do any kind of, Josh's noise is working now.
Yeah, now, hey, Josh, it's working now.
I don't know what
Okay,
you're
cool.
doing, man.
Yeah. So, for instance, buyers were able to go ahead and, a big part of what Maracay does is very option intensive, flex design. And so we were, one of the first ones to put the ability to configure your home with all kinds of your structural option selections, including pricing. We have our design studio virtual online, so customers can, with all their finishes and flooring and different types of cabinetry. We have, we already had good assets, and we just tried to make sure they were more robust in terms of virtually touring homes. So whether that's video tours or Matterport tours, or, so try to make sure that all the homes that we have in our communities, buyers can really get a really good experience on what that is like. We have not a huge part of our business, but some of our business also comes from what we call designer homes, some people call spec homes. And one of the things that we've done recently is we have, rather than actually physically staging some of those homes with furniture, you can do that digitally. And so you can really give the customer the idea of exactly how that house would finish off with furniture. I mean, that specific house, how to furnish them. One thing that we have done sort of post COVID, that some other people have been at more on the forefront, is this remote entry, where customers can, when we have completed homes in our communities, they don't even need to stop at our sales office. They can just go and there's a certain protocol that we just want to make sure we understand who they are, but they can enter the home and tour perfectly at their own leisure. So a number of different things that we have been we were already doing, but of course became really super important over the last couple of months. So I'm really proud of the way the team really sort of nimbly sort of focused on some of those assets and really improved them.
That's
Thanks,
great.
Andy. Darryl, I'm sorry, Court.
Well, let's, I was going to ask Darryl if you all are doing something different, in your marketing and sales and approach with your employees even.
No, that's the same approach as Andy, a lot of virtual tours. I think for us and for Andy, we have a benefit over the resale market in that a new home is a new home, especially in our case, we have no options and so forth. It just, the house is what it is on the rental side. So our traffic has been pretty good. Mark Taylor in this market is our third-party property manager, and we've followed all their protocols, and the marketing virtually has been effective. And And then just like Andy, we've taken steps to ensure that the model units are cleaned often. We shut down our amenities kind of across our portfolio until last week. All of our amenities are now open. So just kind of the standard smart, logical things to do relative to keeping the community safe.
And Ann, what about in the retail space? What are you doing steps? Are you trying to tell your customers that you're doing special stuff to make them more comfortable coming into the stores?
So we do ask that everyone wear a mask. Our staff wears a mask, and we ask that every customer that comes in wear a mask. We wipe down all of our shopping carts. We have hand sanitizer, and as soon as someone enters the store, we ask that they use the hand sanitizer, because we realize if you're going to touch clothes, try them on, we can't be washing those clothes every 2 minutes. So we've just taken the approach, come in with clean hands and you can shop and wear a mask. Got a lot of pushback from people in Arizona about wearing the mask. They sometimes they get so angry. A couple of times we had to call the police because they just became threatening and nasty. And it's for everybody's own good. It's for a 30-minute shopping time. Just go along with it. California, you have to wear a mask, so we've got a lot less pushback there.
Unless you're a police officer, then you don't have to wear a mask.
Yeah, unless you're
right.
Yeah, right. And will you just one other thing I just had to ask you, because we talked about this a little bit before we got on the show, is the PPP and the programming where the government has been paying certain workers money during this period of time. How is that affecting you?
Oh, it's just one more hideous thing in this whole pandemic, and that is we can't get people to come back to work. This $600 additional money they get from the CARES Act, in addition to the $250 or $300 from unemployment, gives them roughly $900 a week to just sit home. They don't want to give it up. And so when we ask them back and they decline, we tell them we're not going to hold their job. They will not be rehired at the end of July when there's 40 million people looking for a job.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to Dr. Lewis. So that question I was raising about, I think we probably all read the CDC's new information and seemed sort of hopeful to me and positive news. What's your take on that?
Well, first of all, can you hear me?
Yes, we got you.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Sorry about that. For me personally, it's not surprising, in practicing medicine during this whole thing, we see lots of respiratory illnesses that are never diagnosed as COVID. We know that there is a large number of people who get infected but don't have the illness. And so intuitively, you would say, okay, the actual numbers of patients who have COVID are much higher than what we're saying it is now based on positive testing. There probably are some people who have died of COVID and are not counted in the deaths of COVID, but we're capturing much more of the deaths than we are of the total people who actually have the disease. So I still think that's encouraging. I think that the actual death rate is probably much lower than what is said. It will continue to be that way, but we don't have enough testing to go around. And so we're never going to diagnose everybody who has it. I mean, it's impractical to try to just do testing on 330 million people just because we can. So we have to only test people who are symptomatic. And that means the people who are not symptomatic, they're probably not getting tested, which is fine, as long as we understand as a population that these people are running around. They're going to the store, they're going to be hanging out with their friends, and you may catch this virus from a person who doesn't have symptoms, and you just have to be mindful of that. And that's why I say that it's probably a good idea to wear masks, although there's so much conflicting information out there about whether or not you have to, whether or not it keeps you safe, whether or not there's potential risk to wearing a mask. But I don't know. The data I've seen says it's reasonable to wear a mask. It helps the numbers of transmission go down when you wear a mask. So, but I do think that it is encouraging. We're not, the actual death rate is much lower than what it is stated.
There was another thing that I read that was pretty positive, I thought too, which was, and I think someone asked about it in the chat. It's apparently not as easy as they had thought to catch it from surfaces, and somebody touched something and then you touch it. Should that change our approach to how we're living our life or make us breathe easier?
Well, it wouldn't change my approach necessarily. I mean, I would still be very cautious about touching things and not washing your hands. I would carry hand sanitizer if you can and use it when you're out in public. I think one thing that we can learn from this whole thing, and I hope that people are seeing, is that this is science. Science is not exact in that everything changes from day to day, and the information we have today is different than yesterday, and the information we have tomorrow will be different than today. So, you know, the CDC had some confusing language about whether or not this disease is spread by fomites, meaning somebody who has it sneezes on their hand, they touch a surface, and then you go and touch that surface and touch your mouth, and then you contract the virus. We don't know what the actual data is on it. It probably is less of a risk than standing next to somebody and breathing the same air or touching another human being. But I still think that there's risk there, and I would still be cautious about being in public places, and I would wash my hands.
Thank you for that, Doctor. Okay, I want to go around the horn. And is there anything that you've learned during this particular crisis that you're going to implement into the future that you think is going to make your business stronger? So, Anne, you want to go? We'll go with you first.
Buy some real estate. From what I learned from Andy and Darryl, I'm very bullish on real estate. But actually in Arizona, it's always been good. Even during the downtime, that was the time to buy. And I've always had great luck with real estate. So thanks, guys.
Well, I think you are invested in Telluride, which is my second favorite place to Phoenix. So that's.
No, I sold 2 years ago. And I'm honestly, Jordan, that is a really messed up place right now. It rivals California.
Perfect. All right. Well, maybe it'll fall down my list then for my stuff. Well, Darryl, anything that you've learned during this that you feel good about that you're going to deploy into the future?
Yeah, I would just say the adage that, things are never as good as they seem, nor as bad as they seem. That's probably been applied here. Don't panic at times like this. You make bets, you make them for the long term. We're going to continue making bets. We're especially going to make bets in Arizona on both the home building and the hotel side. And I think long term, we're going to be okay.
But before I ask Andy, I failed to ask you, Darryl, and I wanted to, is hotels. Oh goodness. I mean, how is that business going, and what do you see as projection for the future?
Our existing hotels are really hurt, no different than kind of the worst of the asset classes, restaurants, hotels, and so forth. We never thought we would face a scenario of zero occupancy, and the notion of, is it less expensive to keep a hotel open or shut a hotel down? It's been really tough. That said, the past few weeks, we've seen some pickup in future bookings, and we think that the market over time will recover. So that's our existing hotel supply. In terms of development, kind of counterintuitively, we are still pushing some ground up development projects, including here in Phoenix, 2 of which are downtown. We think that there will be less supply coming out of this crisis, and that will get hopefully some construction efficiencies on the construction side. In addition, we're not going to C of O these projects if they haven't started yet for 30 some odd months, and so hopefully COVID will be in the rearview mirror by that point. So we're still pushing the ground up developments that we had in the pipeline.
Well, thanks. Andy, what have you learned through this that you're going to deploy?
Honestly, it's a little self-serving, but there's a number of things that we were already doing in Maracay that I feel are, almost Zoom-like, right place, right time. There's people that have been in their home that are in this kind of move up segment as that, continues to, come back, who really value, hey, I want my home exactly the way I want it, right? If I'm going to be spending a lot of time in my home, or maybe my job is shifting, whether 100%, or people realize, oh, I can spend more time in my home and work in my home. So to be able to, use things like what our Flex Design program, or, not cookie cutter, so that really is configured around, someone's unique family requirements. And, just the idea of, 100% of our homes are LEED certified, so people can have confidence that they're energy efficient and healthy and safe homes. I just think that the value of getting just the home you want in the right location, in the right kind of neighborhood, is going to be more important than ever, because one of the things that, really the one common denominator through this whole thing is people have spent a lot more time in whatever their living situation was than ever before. And, people that are really loving their living situation, or we're like, well, thank goodness, but there's a lot of people who are like, no, it's time for me to do something about that. So I'm encouraged about Maracay's value proposition just in general, but also, one thing, I think it's a really good thing that this first-time home buyer segment is really starting to flourish, that the millennial generation, are buying homes. It's a really powerful thing, for all builders. And most of the homes they're buying are resale homes. Of course, it's been great for the new home market, but all things being equal, a first-time home buyer, they're oftentimes trading off between, an older home in a better location in Mesa or Gilbert or someplace like that, Phoenix, versus, being far out in a further away location. In most cases, they're buying move up existing housing stock. And that's a really powerful and helpful thing for a company like Maracay, because the people that are selling their homes to those first-time home buyers are now coming to Maracay to get just the home they want and the location they want.
Thank you, Andy. All right, Dr. Lewis, nobody go away, because we've got DJ Peabody, sorry. Sometimes music is a doctor, but DJ Peabody is gonna play in a second. But Dr. Lewis, just in a minute or two, our last, talk to us a little bit about what you're feeling about the governor's really opened up a lot. And in fact, yesterday, summer camps and schools can be open in the fall. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll answer that question, definitely. There's a few questions asked in text. I'll just rapid fire answer a bunch of questions. I'll keep it really short. But to answer that question specifically, I don't think the governor has any other choice but to open the state. I think we all, by this point, are well informed of the risks, and we all can make these decisions on our own, whether or not we want to be in public or put our children in public and put them at risk. And I don't think it's the governor or other government's job to lock us all down permanently until some solution occurs 2 or 3 years down the road. So I think we all have to take responsibility for our own health and take risks as we see fit. Just to answer a couple of quick questions, somebody had commented that exposing yourself to this disease increases your immunity. I would say, yeah, that's true if you survive the disease, which for most of us we will, but you're still putting yourself at risk. So please be very careful with that advice. Heidi Kimball asked about, can you visit family out of state by car? Is it safe to do so? Yeah, I think that it's safe for you to travel by car or go out of state, visit family, but you got to know if you're visiting family who's older, has multiple medical problems, you may be an asymptomatic carrier of this disease and you may be the one to pass it on to your family members. So be very, very cautious. The false positive rate on the COVID testing is very low, but ultimately we don't know because the testing is very new. In general, the antibody testing is not good, but the PCR testing to tell you if you have the virus on you is pretty darn good. Just things to look out for the future. Be very cautious what you believe from these companies who are developing vaccines. There is no magic bullet. If you look at the history of vaccines, there is great trouble caused by vaccines over time. I don't think any of it was done purposefully, but there are many errors that can be made in manufacturing, testing, and disbursement of these vaccines. And to think that a vaccine will come out by the end of the year is, to me, I wouldn't say impossible, but greatly unlikely. And so this infection is going to keep spreading, and we're going to see it this year. We'll definitely see it next year. And I think the numbers will continue to increase over the next 6 to 12 months. And on the treatment front, there is no good news there. none of the treatments have panned out. So the treatment really is supportive care treatment. So if you end up having to go to the hospital, you're going to get the treatment you need. But just know that, again, there is no magic bullet for this thing. And so you have to remain cautious, and you have to keep yourself healthy by doing these reasonable measures, wearing masks and using hand sanitizer and whatnot.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis, for your just amazing service to our community, and thanks for being on. Thank you, Andy and Darryl and Ann. What a show! I do say this was awesome. Joe Blackburn, I'm sorry you put your guns away this season. Hopefully next episode they'll come back out. There's some people demanding that. And DJ Peabody, I want you to take it away, but I gotta say, normally on this day, this is my kid's last day of school, and normally every year I have this huge party, like, I don't know, 400 people, and DJ Peabody plays for us, and I had to cancel, and I'm super sad. So DJ Peabody, please take it away and try to make me at least happy. Thanks. We'll be back next week. We got a great
Don't stop. Love me. Don't stop.
There you go.
What'd I do? Don't stop. Hey, me. Don't look at what I do. Let's ride. It's a small town girl living in a lonely world.
Wait, where's it doing?
Midnight train anywhere. Just a city boy, born and raised in South Detroit. He took the midnight train
I forgot our next song here.
anywhere. I seen him in a smoking room, and a wine and cheap perfume. For a smile, they can share the night. It goes on and on and on. Strangers waiting up and down the boulevard and shout.
You want to hear that? How many people are still on? That's more people on this time. That's crazy. Okay, so what else we got here? It's a mad world, isn't it? Okay, you'll know this one.
I'll keep by the ocean, yeah, I know the song.
The day they feel good, happy birthday, happy birthday. Temperature should sit down in the sun, sit down in the sun. Is she talking? Is she? Oh. And I find it kind of sad. Gotta keep it seamless. Waste time with a masterpiece. Waste time with a masterpiece. You like that? You should be rolling me. You should be rolling me. You're a real life fantasy. You're a real life fantasy. But you're moving so
There's a lot more people on this time. Oh, this one's muted. Those are all muted. Oh, no, it's so long now.
Keep on holding, cake by the ocean. Keep on holding, cake by the ocean. Hot damn, see you licking frozen from your own hand. Want another taste? I'm begging, yes, ma'am. I'm tired of all this candy on the dry land. Dry land, oh. Waste time with the masterpiece. Waste time with the masterpiece. You should be rolling me. You should be rolling me. You're a real life fantasy. You're a real life fantasy. But you're moving so carefully. Let's start living dangerously. Talk to me, baby. I'm going to dance with me, baby. Let's move on to go crazy, crazy. Keep on hoping, cake by the ocean.
Oh, and did you just like make it fade away?
What?
It looks like faded away.
Well, it depends.
Bass drum.
I'll be right back.
That's right. Bass drum. Oh, bass drum. That's right. Well, we have a piano, of course. Yes, of course. Bass drum. That's right. Bass drum. Oh, bass drum. That's right. Bass drum. Oh, bass drum. That's right. Bass drum. Oh, bass drum. That's right.
What are the instruments in your group?
That's right. That's right.
What are the instruments in your group?
Bass drum. That's right. Bass drum. Oh, bass drum. That's right. Bass drum. Oh, bass drum. That's right. Bass drum. Oh, bass drum. That's right.
What are the instruments in your group?
Riders on the storm. Riders on the storm. Into this house we're born. Into this world we're thrown. Like a dog without a bone. And master out alone. Riders on the storm. There's a killer on the road. His brain is squirming like a toad. Take a long holiday. Let your children play. If you give this man a ride, sweet family will die. Killer on the road. Yeah. to hear you. Girl, you gotta love your man. Girl, you gotta love your man. Take him by the hand. Make him understand. The world on you depends on life forever. You gotta love your man. Yeah.
A lot of typing.
Riders on the storm. Riders on the storm. Riders on the storm. Riders on